Hey, good morning. Happy New Year. Let me just turn the music down here a little bit. Let's make it easier to, talk. Got a bit of a cold. Still getting over it. I don't know. I didn't go get tested or anything like that. So, you spend many years growing up and becoming an adult and going through things, and it's a cold. So that's what I'm going to treat it as, because I don't know that I'd do any different. By the way, mind you, don't try to find any cold medication out there. There's none to be found anywhere. I don't know why. Who knows? We can blame whoever we want and say whoever we want, but welcome. And so I thought we would start off the year with a couple of different themes here in the chat this morning, and on the live stream this morning. One is what things to do in 2023. I know we all make resolutions and things that we're going to do and go forward, but I just thought I'd look at a few things that you could do going forward in the new year, professionally and even maybe a bit personally as well. And then, of course, the other thing is things to do on a new safety job. That's that new start thing. Somebody messaged me yesterday, and I do hope he joins today. Starting a new job and coming up, and congratulations for that, Johnny. But I thought I'd made a video earlier on, last year, a year ago. Well, anyway, about things to do, but mostly what not to do on a new safety job. And it's funny when you get right down to it. It's very interesting that we will always pick out things that we shouldn't do versus things that we should do on a new safety job. And so I thought what I'd do is start this video with the new year, things to do in the new year, and then talk about some do's and don'ts on a new safety job, especially day one, and going through the first week, because the first week is kind of tough. It really is. And so, without further ado, let's get started, and let's talk about the chat rules first. They haven't changed much. Participate, please. Introduce yourself in the chat, who you are, where you're from, your experience, etc., because who you are matters and what you know matters. And I like to hear from you. The other thing is, though, is ask and answer. Ask questions in the chat, or if you're joining later on, post them in the comments. Your opinions count. Your knowledge counts. But also on that note, remember, not all of us popped out of the womb knowing health and safety and being safety experts. We all had to start somewhere. So be nice, be civil, no name calling, no insults, nothing like that. Be cool, be professional. And on the note of professionalism, this is not professional advice, okay? There's no money changing hands, no contracts changing or being signed or anything else like that. So this is more collaboration. And a lot of it, when you get right down to it, depending on what I'm saying and doing, a lot of it is just based on my personal experience. So, don't consider it as professional advice. Okay? Now, excuse me, as I said, I'm getting over a cold, so I'm going to do my best not to, die on camera. So, with every new year, we all start to make resolutions, things that we want to do, and we set out with good intentions. Now, we have to realize that it's great to have good intentions. It's great. We need good intentions. We need to have some sort of ambition and initiative to set momentum. However, we have to realize one thing, that when we set our to-do goals and we set our list, what we need to do is what we should be doing is reevaluating and reviewing what we had set out to do in 2022 before we tackle 2023. There is no shame in carrying over things that you didn't get done with the notion of getting it done in the following year. And so review your goals. Also look at what worked and why it worked. Okay? What were you successful at? What were you good at? What did you do and do well? And then can you apply that to what you want to get done in 2023? On that note, the second piece of advice, and you know what? This quote is bandied about and it's often misquoted, not even sure if I've got it right. But Thomas Edison, when he was asked about failing a myriad of times in inventing the light bulb, and I know Canadians, I know all about it. But anyway, beside the point, this is the point, is he said that there's 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb, and he learned each one of them. And so you have to understand that while you may have fallen down in some of the things that you wanted to get done in 2022, there's no shame. Understand that that's just a way not to make a light bulb. And maybe what didn't work, what worked well, and then apply that going forward. Now, the next thing that you need to do is look at expanding your network by 5 people. Okay? Whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it is in another social media presence, whether it's just in a professional meeting session where you're starting off joining a lunch group or whatever the case may be, expand your network by 5 people. Okay, if you look to do that, you're going to have quite a hefty network in a few years. And if you don't make 5, not a big deal, but look at expanding your network. You need to expand your network. Operating alone and in a silo is just that. You're stuck with your own ideas, you're stuck with your own perspective, and really and truthfully, while it might be a good perspective, it doesn't hurt to expand. So look at expanding your network by 5 people. It doesn't necessarily need to be 5 safety people. It doesn't necessarily need to be people of like mind, but just look at expanding your network. I can't stress it enough. The other thing is, while you're doing that, share your mistakes as well as your triumphs. We always want to brag about what we did well. Hey, look at us. We did this well. And by all means, that makes a world of sense. It does. It makes a world of sense to do that. However, when it gets right down to it, if you learn to share your triumphs and your mistakes, what can happen is you're sharing what worked well for you, but when you share your mistakes, what can happen is a lot of times people say, hey, you know what, that happened to me, but this is what I did to get over it. Or, hey, did you think of trying this? So a lot of times it doesn't hurt to share your mistakes. I can remember when I was at an emergency management symposium in Toronto quite some years back. And I was reveling at the fact that there was such a collection of people that were willing to share what went wrong. But when they shared what went wrong, it helped the rest of us to not do that. Plus, there was some meeting of the minds and some other people were able to bring up solutions that worked for them. So don't be afraid of sharing what went wrong. Now, there's more. I mean, it wouldn't be right to not have more, would it? Set 3 to 5 corporate goals. I don't know how your professional development cycle is working with your organization. I don't know what your organization does, but if you're already goal setting within your occupation and job, great. But try to set 3 corporate goals and then 3 personal goals, whether it be like personal goals might be, I'm going to vow to walk for at least 20 minutes 3 times a week, or I'm going to read 1 book a month. I know, book. That's weird, isn't it? Like a weird idea, a book. But look at setting not just your corporate goals, but look at personal goals as well. And personal goals that mean something and that are going to enrich you. But that leads me to the next point. Schedule goofing off time. Whether it be binge watching something on Netflix one day a week or something to that effect. Hey, good morning, David. Glad to see you. Happy New Year. Glad you showed up. Awesome. Feel free to enter your questions in the chat if you want, Dave. But schedule some goofing off time, because what happens is you've heard the old sayings, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Even thousands of years ago, when the Israelites were crossing the desert, even it was dictated and indicated to them and commanded to them that they're to take one day off a week. So regardless, you need to take time off. So schedule time off, schedule goofing time, schedule time where you don't have to think. And contrary to popular belief, you don't need to always be enriching yourself. If you're watching something on Netflix that has absolutely no plot just to give your brain a break, that's fine too. Whatever it is, do it. You need it. Now, the next thing is explore volunteering and altruism. It is good for the soul and it is enriching. Not only that, it does aid to building a CV. Employers and prospective managers and supervisors look upon that with a lot of favor when they're reviewing applications and resumes. So look at volunteering. I am active in my church. I volunteer on the board. I also do, and this shouldn't come as a big surprise, the live stream work. It's a good thing, but it also helps to expand your network in a different direction opposite from your professional life. So look at volunteering, whether it's with SPCA or Habitat for Humanity or whatever the case may be, but look at exploring some volunteering and altruism. It is truthfully chicken soup for the soul in a lot of ways. The other thing, go outside and walk. Okay, we're meant to be outside once in a while. So go outside and walk. A walk, even if it's just to the mailbox to check your mail, but go outside for heaven's sakes. There is nothing more therapeutic than going outside and just enjoying the weather. If you can get out to nature and walk in the woods or whatever, that's even better. If your municipality has, in the summertime, a local flower garden or anything like that, by all means, getting outside is essential. It is exactly that, good for the soul, and helps you wonders. Yeah. And like anything else, if you have thoughts, leave a comment, hop into the chat if you want to ask a question, or if you're catching the live stream later, leave a comment. I appreciate all the comments I get, and I try to answer questions, and there will be a Q&A at the end of this, so I will answer some questions from other people that have popped them into the comments. But now, something some of you might have been waiting for, but things to do on a new safety job. Now, no matter what, typically on a new job, you're going to be greeted by your boss, or if your boss can't make it, their designate, and you're likely going to have to fill out tedious amounts of forms for HR. And depending on your organization, you may have to listen to a recorded webinar on things like conflict of interest, privacy, inclusion, diversity, things like that. But all of those are things that normally happen, and depending on the size and dynamics of your organization, they're going to have a polished process because they've been used to employee cycles, and so they've got it down to a process. And so no matter what, go with the flow. Whatever your employer is scheduling for you to do on day one, go with the flow, by all means. And one of the things that I can't stress enough, have a moleskin and a pen, a notebook and a pen. Yeah, a lot of people say, well, I just carry my phone, or I carry an iPad and an Apple Pencil. Have you ever tried to write with one of those things while you're walking or moving or anything else like that? I mean, if you can, great, good on you. But there's nothing wrong with an old-fashioned notebook and pen. So what I want to do is just talk about a few things that you want to try and slide in there on day one, and then we're going to talk about the first week. So on day one, what you want to do is try and meet and greet the managers of each section and department. you're going to be supporting them in some way, shape, or fashion in the coming days, weeks, months, hopefully years. And so what you need to do is try to make and put some faces to names and get some. Remember, you should never judge a book by its cover. So first impressions are great, but don't let them be something that's seated well with you. I can remember I met a dean of an organization I worked for, and he said, "Oh, you're the new safety manager. Well, rent, don't buy." And quite acerbic in the first meeting, and but as weeks and months and years went on, came to have an awesome working relationship. So no matter what, just try to meet and greet, and don't let first impressions necessarily be formative for you, but more so you can put a face to the name. Okay, now the next thing you want to do is try your best to learn about the labor and contract climate. Is it like union-based, or is it an organization that relies heavily on contractors and contract employment? Or is there, how should we say, quite an employee cycle? Is there... my monitor just went out for my switcher, so I'm going to do my best here. But getting back to the employer, the labor climate, what is it like? Is it something where longevity is historical and there's people there that have been long-term employees for a long, long time? Or is it something where there's almost kind of like a revolving door for whatever reason? It's seasonal, cyclical, etc. So try to keep an idea or get an idea of what the labor and contract climate is like. Now, the next thing you want to do is find out where the bathrooms are. You know what? You don't want to be running around in a big panic. So if you're working in a large complex and going from building to building, try to make note of the bathrooms as you're walking in and out. If you're in one area, ask where the bathrooms are. And it also gives you a bit of a break just to go and get a bit of a mind break. Go to the bathroom, wash your hands, splash some cold water on your face, especially because you're going to be ending up with information overload first day. The next thing is find out where the muster area is and where to eat lunch. Okay, pretty important. And I know it sounds like kind of almost... defeatist, is asking about muster areas and emergency management on day one. I'll just tell you something. When I first started with SATE, when I was the manager there for health and safety, very first day, I'm in a large building where my office is, and I really don't know my way around. In fact, I was almost thinking of breadcrumbs and a map. And the fire alarm went off. And I said to one of my team, I said, "Okay, I'm sticking with you because I have no clue what's going on here." And she said, "Yep, just follow me. And it's a two-stage alarm, so we'll have to just wait." And I'd never been in a building with a two-stage alarm before, nothing. So it doesn't hurt to figure that out and find that out day one. And find out where the muster area is and where lunch is, etc. Now, there's more. I know you'd think that that would already cover it for day one, but the other thing is find the cheapest parking. If you don't have to pay for parking, bonus, awesome. But one of the mistakes I made is when I was working in an organization, I was paying like something like 15 or 16 bucks a day or 18 bucks a day. I forget what it was. It was astronomical for where I was going to park. Oh, good morning, John. And it wasn't, I'd been there for 2 weeks paying this. And then somebody said, "Oh, no, you can park here for $10 a day." Oh, really? So find the cheapest parking, find the best parking possible, and make sure that you're taking note of all of that. Just because also, too, I've seen, especially in large urban centers where you're going and parking, you might end up with a ticket or numerous tickets in your first week of work. You don't want that. So day one, and it doesn't hurt, even go before you start and find scope out parking spots. Now, the other thing is, and I've seen it lots, I've hired people that have done this. Don't diss your last job. Don't diss any of your jobs, because you know what? What's going through their people's heads when they're talking to you is, what is he or she going to say about us? So don't. Your last job was awesome. You're at this job because it's awesomer. Or is something about the job really interested you, or you found it a way to expand your horizons and stretch your skills, or you were fascinated by the posting and you thought it might be time for a change. No matter what, do not diss your old job. Don't diss the people you worked with. Don't disparage your old bosses, anything. It is not a good look on anybody, so don't do it. The other thing is, find out how reception or security like their coffee. I cannot tell you and dwell on this enough. These people have superpowers, okay? In fact, superpowers you may not even consider. You are going to find yourself locked out, lost something, need to understand phone numbers, want to know how to contact somebody, etc. Security or reception are the ones that know this, okay? So no matter what, find out how they like their coffee. Okay, because it doesn't hurt bringing a coffee once in a while, because when you're locked out and you need to get into your office, or you've lost your keys or something, you know what? It's a little bit of front-end investment that's going to come in super handy. Trust me on that. Then, find out when your boss wants a follow-up meeting. It doesn't hurt after they've talked and just about, and usually what happens, if it's a great organization, your boss is going to meet, greet, have some time, have that first initial cup of coffee in the morning, and then maybe assign you a tour guide or something. They might walk you around, etc. But whatever you do, just say, is there a time that you and I can meet later on this week? Because I'm going to have a bunch of questions and I don't want to let them fall off the desk or go by the wayside. So I want to make sure I can schedule something with you towards the end of the week. It does a couple of things. Number one, it shows your boss you're a critical thinker. Okay? Number two is it helps you to start considering the questions that you're going to be asking. Okay? And number three is your boss will then set aside some time, and your boss might even come up with a few things that might have slipped by him or her. So do that. I found when I did that this last job I was at, it was awesome. And when I started this most current gig I'm on, it worked well for me as well. So do that. Find out when your boss wants to have that follow-up meeting. Okay, so that's day one. And you're going to be filled, honestly, you're going to be filled with so much in your head on day one that it's going to be difficult. You're going to be filled with information overload. So I can't stress it enough. Carry a pencil, carry a pad or a notebook, something. I prefer a moleskin. My moleskin is not on my desk, which is unusual. I hope I didn't lose it. But I always carried a moleskin and pen. And I would use it for a lot of different things, especially writing down names and a quick something that would help key my memory on who I just met, etc. It works great. Now, on a new safety job for the week, here's some other rules to follow. Okay? Do more listening than talking. Okay? Except when you're asking questions. Ask questions. They're great. But a lot of times, people are going to put you on the spot, and everybody that you encounter needs to know you're both a good talker and a good listener. So balance that out. Ask questions, listen. If somebody wants to get information from you, try to give it as short as possible and do more listening to them. The other thing is try to memorize names. One trick that I use and tends to work quite well with me is when you first meet somebody, hi, Johnny, how you doing? And talk about Johnny and mention Johnny at least 3 times in one sentence. Call that person by name at least 3 times in the first couple of minutes that you're interacting with them. It helps you to cement their name. Also look at their face while you're doing it. If you do that, it tends to help you remember names better. I just find it. There's other tricks, and if anybody knows of other tricks, by all means, leave them in the comments. I'd appreciate it. But that's one of the ones I use. Now, whatever you do, don't talk about changing anything right away. Like people will say, you know what, we've had our safety program around for years and it's about time for a change. Or other people who may have been involved in some of the work that you're going to be involved in might be concerned about change. Don't talk about changing anything right away. In fact, use this old analogy of a paramedic or first aid attendant or whatever. You have to properly assess before you can determine what needs to be cared for. So when I used to teach occupational first aid attendants, I used to tell them, nobody dies in 30 seconds. Take the time to figure out what's wrong with them before you start treating, because you might be treating the wrong thing. So don't talk about changing anything. You don't need to make a name for yourself right away. In fact, the first impressions you should be making is good listener, attentive, a thinker, pragmatic, etc. Analyst. Don't think that you're going to need to change anything right away. You might be surprised on, after all, what you find out what is working well. So yes, do review safety documents, programs, safe work procedures, etc. But this is something that you can treat it like medication, a little bit at a time. Don't sit down in front of your desk and decide you're going to absorb all of the documents all at once. It won't work. It's like trying to cram for a test. And number two is especially if you can get electronic versions, you might have that opportunity while you're moving throughout the work site and that just to stop and read something, or treat it as reading during lunch, coffee, or you know what, you're likely going to be burning the midnight oil a bit. It's okay for some nighttime reading as well. So yes, you're going to have to review the safety documents. One tip I can give you, the best I can, say for instance, you're working in a big operation and it's got, like say, a maintenance department, it's got a warehousing department. So if you're going to go and have a look at the maintenance department, you might want to start to pull the hazard assessments and safe work procedures that pertain to that. Try to give them a quick overview, then go have a look and see if what's going on is validating what's written down. Same thing with warehouse. If you are going to the warehouse, you might want to have a look at who's got forklift licenses or certificates, who's got, and the job hazard assessments for the warehouse. You might want to have a look at safe work procedures for the warehouse, things like that. And then have a look and see if what's going on is validated what's written down. And so, yes, you're going to have to review those documents, but don't try to grab them and review them all at once. Now, one of the things that does happen is you may encounter things like this. And don't go all safety commando on them. Apparently, we're not supposed to use the term safety Nazi anymore, so I won't. But don't go all safety commando on them. Don't start barking orders and being all safety police. This is an opportunity to make a good first impression and show your professionalism. So it might be, hey, folks, well, can we stop work here for a second? Can we just lower this and let me introduce myself? Let's have a talk. And use this as a teachable moment. Stop, correct, and then observe and make sure the work is going on safely. And you know what? You may have to say, look, we can't let this go on. You're going to have to wait until you can get the proper lift in here to do this job, etc. It's unfortunate, but yes, I've started new jobs and seen people in things like trenches that were 7 feet deep and barely wide enough for them to get into. I've seen things where people were doing exactly something like this and standing on a pallet on top of a forklift. And so, you know what? you're definitely going to have to use it as a teachable moment. Okay? Yeah, enough said. So, more. Learn about your collective agreements. Excuse me. Learn about your collective agreements. If it's union-based and it's your unionized environment, know that collective agreement. Learn about them, and as soon as possible, because if you don't, you're doing everyone a disservice. Because you're representing everybody. Yes, you do represent the employer and so forth, but as a safety person, you're representing safety. Okay, you're representing health and safety for the organization. So you're not necessarily taking sides or anything, but you do need to understand that contract agreement between the workforce and the employer. Okay, so learn about the collective agreement, and you're going to get tested on it anyway. Trust me, you will. So learn about it, and on that note, try to learn who the shop stewards are and form as good a working relationship with them as possible. Now, do not speak ill of others before you, regardless. Like if they were, and I can remember once a friend of mine took a position with an organization filling in for a safety person who was off for an extended amount of time. And they hadn't really done anything with a health and safety program to that point. The documents, anything, nothing had been done. They basically were collecting a paycheck. And I urged that person, I urged that friend of mine, no matter what, do not disparage this person because they may come back, they may not. You may end up working with them, you may not. But no matter what, it's treated as, okay, the bell's been rung, and what are we going to do going forward? There's no sense dwelling on it, and it's not a good look on you. As tempting as it is, I mean, you could end up sounding like some of our folks in Ottawa where they're going Harper, Harper, Harper after 7 years. Don't blame the person that came before you. Don't speak ill of them. Just take your challenges and meet your challenges head on. I can't stress it enough. It's definitely something you need to do. Now, the other thing is meet with the Health and Safety Committee as soon as possible. Even if there's not a meeting that's scheduled, see if you can get an out-of-scheduled one to occur, or make an effort to go and meet every single member of the Health and Safety Committee and meet them as soon as possible, because that it's helpful to you. Okay, it's extremely helpful to you. They're the biggest driver of the safety culture in the organization. They influence the safety climate. They're really the brain trust of safety in the organization. A lot of times you'll have some longevity on the committee, and they'll be able to share with you a lot of the safety history. And honestly, if they're not the pulse of safety in the organization, they're not the driver of the safety culture, they're not influencing the safety climate as I've talked about, they're not that brain trust, they're not functioning well, then guess what? You now have one of the highest priorities on your to move up on your list, and that's getting a good functioning health and safety committee within the next couple of months. Because if an organization doesn't have a good functioning health and safety committee, it doesn't matter how strong you are, how good you are, how professional you are, how much experience, you're going to have a really tough challenge ahead of you. Okay, you need them, and so meet them and form a good relationship with them. The other thing is, don't get caught up on gossip, okay? Regardless of what went on or whatever the case may be, a lot of times what will happen too is you get told things like, we tried that didn't work. Don't argue, but find out why. Don't get caught up on what your predecessors did. Don't get caught up on any kind of the internal strife and gossips that may be going on in an organization. Just be that new guy, that new gal, that new observer. Oh, yeah. And there's more. There's more. And these are, as I said, these are things that I have found worked and didn't, and things that I made, the mistakes I made, and how I've grown from them. So the other thing is, don't agree with anything regarding a budget or expense. One of the things that I did in the first week of organization I worked with is one of the senior managers for the areas that they looked after, it was supposed to be their responsibility. And somehow I ended up paying, it wasn't much, it was about $1,200 out of my pretty much non-existent budget that I had. I signed for signage that said hearing and eye protection must be worn beyond this point, and had all of these signs made up because, well, that's a safety thing. And I thought, yeah, that's a safety thing. Yeah, so don't agree with anything regarding budget in the first week until you've checked with your boss and have a good understanding of what your budgetary constraints are and what your responsibilities are and what your authority is, because people will try to pawn something off on you as safety. Okay, so make sure you're aware of your budget responsibilities and constraints before you agree to anything. The next thing you want to do is walk the property, the facility, etc. If you have a bunch of different locations, then try to get to all of them within the first week, if possible. Like I can remember when I worked for Northern Lights College, it's 108,000 square kilometers in northern British Columbia, and things like Dease Lake and that, where to get there, I had to either drive down through Prince George, up around through Smithers and the opposite way, or drive to Fort St. John, fly to Vancouver, fly to Whitehorse, and then drive to Dease Lake. So it wasn't necessarily going to happen in the first week. However, I made an effort to get there as soon as possible and have a look at that campus so I could better understand that, and the Atlan campus. So try to get around the property, the facility, your locations as quick as possible so that you have a good understanding. And I can't find my cell phone. Oh well. Cell phones help. Wonderful. You can take pictures, etc., and help you to review things. So, and once again, your notebook, it comes in handy. If the organization you're working for has a facility map, by all means, try to acquire that so you can make notes on it and have an understanding. You likely won't need it long, but it's certainly helpful within the first week, because remember, you're going to be dealing with information overload. It doesn't matter how young you are, how much you retain, etc., that there's always going to be information overload. So don't let it impede you. Don't try to solve everyone's problems. Now, you're going to be meeting people, and you might hear gripes, you might hear honest, actual issues. But easiest response that I found is, hey, you know what? I'm brand new. I'm making a list and I'm prioritizing. So you know what? I'm going to look into it as soon as I can. Like I said, it might just be a gripe, or it might actually be a bona fide issue. But no matter what, write it down and say, hey, I'm adding it to the list. I'm going to look into it, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. Ideally, when you do that, you would want to try and give the person a time frame, but I'm going to leave that with you. I mistakenly said I always try to respond to things within 24 hours, and you know what? That's great. Sometimes it's very impractical, because just when you say that, some emergency comes up and you can't do it. So, yeah. Now, the other thing is, don't ignore history, but don't dwell on what was. A lot of times, I've heard it time and time again, well, we tried that, didn't work. Okay, really? Why didn't it work? What happened? Tell me about it. Okay. So, if we had the opportunity to do it over again, what would you do? What would you do? What would you do instead to help it be a success? And because a lot of times, remember, and I've shared it on videos before, authorship leads to ownership, which leads to commitment. So a lot of times when something didn't work, or people have, how should I say, animosity towards something or resistance or whatever, a lot of times it's because they're not being consulted. They haven't been asked, or there's no consultation going on. So you know what? It doesn't hurt to ask them, why didn't it work out? What happened? And now the biggest one I want to share with you is this: don't burn out. Okay, you're going to be burning the candle at both ends. You're going to be there before everybody shows up for work. You're going to be likely the last one to leave in that first week. But remember, if you burn out, you are absolutely no good to anybody whatsoever. Okay, so make sure that you take that time to get your rest. Take the time to rest. Go for walks, hug a loved one, whatever it is that you need to do to recover and have that respite time. I understand you want to hit the ground running, you want to be a success, but pace yourself. You didn't get hired just for a week or 10 days. You got hired with an indeterminate amount of time of how long you're going to be at this organization. So it's a marathon, not a sprint. Okay? I can't stress that enough. And like anything else, if you have questions, shoot me one off in the chat. In the comments, if you haven't, I don't see anything in the comments yet. But if you have something, or you're viewing this later on, leave it in the comments. I try to answer all of the comments. They're actually a good source of some of the Q&A that I do. So by all means. And now there are a few questions that people have left me. And so this one from Sinai, I apologize, I'm not going to try and pronounce your last name because, well, I would not do it well. And it's this: can we include a table of contents and a list of figures in an investigative report? Actually, by all means, depending on the complexity of your report. If your report if it's a really simple incident investigation and there's really not a lot of detail that goes into it, your investigation form might be your report. But if it is substantial, it is complex, there's a lot of corrective actions, you might need to even go beyond that. You might need to have a table of contents, an executive summary, the overview of your report. You might need to have a list of figures, a list of tables for measurements that you've taken, maybe external reports from hygienists or engineers, things like that. So your report might be thick. The biggest and thickest one that I ever did was about 100 pages. It required legal consultation to go over, etc. Had to be submitted to government levels, different government departments, etc. So depending on the complexity of that organization, you might have a lot more goes into it than you would think. So don't be afraid of making a big report, but if you have a complex report, include an executive summary, because that executive summary might be all that the CEO has the opportunity or time to read. Most of the time they will make time to read, but a lot of times that executive summary is the pre-reading material before your presentation of your findings. So don't forego the importance of an executive summary. I hope that answers that question. Now, next one comes from Morale Inside. Morale. I think this is Seifeldien. But anyway, can you explain the difference between a hazard and hazardous events? Hold on a sec. And by all means, take for instance in Alberta, the definition of a hazard is a situation, condition, or thing that may be harmful to workers. You can have other definitions, a situation, condition, or thing, where interaction with that situation, condition, or thing can have an adverse outcome or consequence. Whatever the case may be, a hazard is that situation, condition, or thing, when exposed to, will have a negative reaction with the worker or the environment or the assets. Now, a hazardous event is exactly that. It's that interaction. So, say for instance, broken glass. The hazard with handling broken glass is exposure to sharp edges. The person cutting themselves is that hazardous event. You can look at the fact when you're, say, storing flammable goods, and of course, one of the hazards is that you're trying to protect against is a fire. And if a fire breaks out, that's that hazardous event. Often what we're doing when we're doing investigations is we're investigating that hazardous event. Really. That's what happens to it. A lot of times with terminology, and that's why I made a video quite a while back about having definitions within your health and safety program, because depending, or your management system documents, whatever you're going to call it, because what happens is with jurisdiction to jurisdiction and geographical settings, there's always going to be different terminology that's used. A lot of times, and it's unfortunate, sometimes safety professionals create terminology just to make themselves sound good. Because I can remember once when I was taking a paramedical course, and somebody said, well, my previous instructor, like when we used to ask a patient history and ask what they had for the last meal, and he says, my previous instructor said we should ask what they had for their last oral intake. And I said, sure, whatever, I don't care. Ask what they had as their last meal, and if they say nothing, did you have anything to eat at all, to eat or drink? Once again, don't rest on semantics, but with your health and safety documents, make sure that you define your terms so that everybody's reading off the same page. And especially people with English as a second language, because no matter what, it's super confusing to them. So it's also another good reason to make sure that you're defining all of your terms within your health and safety management system. Okay, next thing, and forgive me, these are really small writing in my notes. Can you explain the difference between a safety program, safety plan, and a safety manual? Yes, Zaldi, I can. And so, a safety program, let's go back to the base definition. First off, what is health and safety? Health and safety is essentially the identification and assessment of hazards to analyze them for the risk, and then applying controls so that that risk is either eliminated or significantly reduced so work can continue safely. A safety program is essentially the activities that you're going to be doing to achieve that end. And a safety program is usually sets of documents. Sometimes it's all contained in one thing called a safety manual. Now, once again, depending on the jurisdiction, some jurisdictions will call a safety manual something for a safe work procedure. They'll say it's the safety manual for this, the safety manual for that. So once again, it also begs to talk about making sure that your definitions in your safety management system are clear. A safety management system, incidentally, I made a video on that recently. It's how all of the different systems within your organization interact to achieve that health and safety. So you'll have operations, human resources, finance, administration, etc., and all of them interacting with that goal of safety is that safety management system. Now, a safety plan is a little bit different. Safety plans are usually required by jurisdictions, especially when there's high consequence activities like working at heights and fall protection, confined space entry, blasting, etc. There's usually got to be a safety plan. So think of it another way, a safe work plan. And so what you're doing is you're planning, you're assessing identifying and assessing all of the hazards, putting controls into place specifically for that specific duty. Like say for instance, it's a construction company and they're just a small one and they're doing small jobs off site. They're dispatching workers. So what should happen is the area that they're going to go work in should be observed by who's doing the project planning, the managers, the powers that be. And then they should create a safe work plan or a safety plan for how work is going to go on, especially if, say, for instance, one of the things that I see lots is landscapers who are doing tree trimming and there's power lines. That should include a safety plan on how you're going to work around and deal with all of that. Same thing as if there's you're erecting scaffolding along the side of a residence and it's only temporary. That scaffolding should include a safety plan that's not only the erecting and the dismantling of the scaffolding, but also working at heights on that as well. So that's what a safety plan is. It's different from a safety program, different from the safety manual, etc. But once again, make sure that you've defined it clearly within your safety management system. There we go. And that's pretty much it as far as the questions I had. I don't see anything else in the chat. Johnny, got to ask you, did that help with the do's and don'ts for the first day and week in a new job? There's a bit of a delay in the chat, so that's why I'm waiting a bit. Yeah. And once again, I just want to say it again. If you're joining late or viewing the live stream later on, by all means, leave questions in the comments. I appreciate all of the comments I get, all of the interaction. And yes, continue to hit me up on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all of those other places. That's great. I do try to answer those as well. Keeping in mind that I do have a full-time job and other constraints as well. But yeah. And if anybody's interested in one of my goals for this coming year is I would like to see, I've treated this channel as a hobby more so than anything else. I would like to see if I can monetize it by June. I'm getting close, and so that's why I decided, okay, maybe it's time to consider that. So that's one of the goals I'm looking at right now. Yeah. Okay. Well, if there's no further questions for the chat, suppose I should turn the camera while I'm looking at a different monitor, but anyway, yeah. Maybe then what I'll do is bid you adieu. Have a wonderful Saturday. Great to see David, Johnny, you guys here. Anybody else that's entered in? I've seen a few viewers come and go. Once again, comment, like, don't like, etc. I've found that a lot of people, it's funny that a lot of people will unsubscribe or whatever, but not leave me a comment as to why or whatever the case would be. I understand that people come and go, but if I've done something wrong or I've, how should I say, disappointed you in a video offering, I'd like to know. But anyway, yeah, until we see each other again, I really hope we do. I hope to live stream again in 2 more weeks. And if anybody wants to see different subjects about a live stream, by all means, let me know on that as well. But until we see each other again, be that safety leader, be an influencer, and lead by example, provoke safety wherever you are. Okay? Take care. Bye for now, everyone.